Greetings and welcome back to room 303 of the Harvard Classics. This is lecture number 62, Aeschylus The Furies. Now this is the last play, the third play in the famous Oresteia trilogy as we've been talking about it. Sometimes it's called The Furies, sometimes it's called the Eumenides. Now we can talk really quickly and deal with this two-title gig. When it's referenced as the Furies, it's emphasizing the scary kind of three witches that are going to haunt Orestes because he's killed his mother. When the word Eumenides is used, it translates usually as the kind ones, the ones who are looking after. By the end of this play, the nasty witches have become, the nasty Furies, goddesses, have become actually more kind, more compassionate, more willing to provide both blessings as well as curses. We'll get to that when they start out as Furies and nasty women, gods of hell, if you will, and they are Tartaros, and they end up the Eumenides, the kind ones. And of course, the Eumenides can sometimes be understood ironically as well when they're spoken of the kind ones. They're actually not kind at all, especially at the beginning of the play. Now, before we get into this play, I just want to remind you at LearnStrong.net, if you haven't been following lectures, I really recommend go to LearnStrong.net, down the left-hand side, find the Harvard Classics link there, and for sure watch Lecture 59, which is the introduction to Greek drama, and then for sure watch Lecture 60, which is the Agamemnon, the first of the trilogy, and in that play, Agamemnon comes home with his war prize Cassandra. Clytemnestra and her lover Aeschylus are waiting, invite him in, give him a bath, jack him, as well as Cassandra, and the play will end with Clytemnestra defending herself because before they left for the war, Agamemnon sacrificed, because the goddess Artemis told him he must, Agamemnon sacrificed his own daughter Iphigenia on the altar, okay, which obviously Mama was not pleased with. For 10 years she waited for the Trojan War to end, and when Agamemnon came home, in the play, the Agamemnon gets his. And then finally I would watch Harvard Classics lecture number 61, where I work with the second of the plays of the trilogy, the Oresteia, the libation bearers. Here, Agamemnon has a son, Orestes, why we call it the Oresteia. He comes back, and with the help of his sister Electra, they take care of both Aeschylus, this lover who is as well in the family, and more importantly, Orestes kills his own mother, Clytemnestra, at the end of that play. Now, the important thing at the end of that play, and we'll pick right up with it, is that at the end of the play, the chorus is already predicting that Orestes will be haunted and go crazy because of these Furies, these goddesses of vengeance who come after you if you kill kindred blood, okay? And we'll get into this question about why that's kind of an important myth in some ways. Can you live in a society, we'll ask at the end of this lecture, can you live in a society where people are not afraid of doing something really terrible like committing murder, especially murder of a family member, right? Okay, so we'll have that question at the end. Now, we will turn to the resolution or the culmination. Now, there's going to be a huge debate about what kind of resolution at the end of this play, and of course at the end of the trilogy called the Oresteia. Now, again, just to go back, this is the only extant trilogy that we have from the Greek era. Now, we know that they did this a lot. We just don't have a lot of these. We don't have any more of these trilogy-like plays. So this is really important text for us in a number of ways. Of course, let's think about this. The Oresteia, at its core, has really been a text about, no question, revenge, but more importantly, justice. Is it okay to take the life of someone who has taken the life of someone you love? Right? Is that okay? This is, of course, that whole notion of payback, if you will, all right? Now, a couple of things about background knowledge. You know that we like to do this as we help you with your study. So let's take a couple of quick notes here in background information so that I can help you read this play and maybe even view this play a little bit easier, all right? First of all, Aeschylus, no question, the father of tragedy, he's often referred to as. He is brilliant. I'm going to try and point that out again in this lecture. But I want to point out he is an amazing figure in the history of Greece as well. For example, let me just give you this example. Aeschylus fought in two of the most important wars for the Greeks, and in fact, when he dies, he writes his own words on his tombstone, and he mentions nothing about being a writer. He mentions about being this great warrior to defend the Greek state. In other words, let's put it in your notes, Aeschylus is a patriot, through and through a patriot, which is going to raise some interesting questions for us in this play, especially at the end of the play. Having said that, let's say this. Aeschylus, as the father of tragedy, as we sometimes refer to him, he is a clear and clear outright iconoclast. No question. I remember that term. To be an iconoclast means you go against the rules. For example, later it will be Aristotle in his classic text Poetics that he will talk about the most important thing about a play is that it must have the unities of time, place, and action. That means the play has to take place in a 24-hour period, unity of time, has to take place in a single setting, unity of place, right? Can't have a play all over the place for Aristotle. And finally, number 3, the action has to be consistently about a single important line of thought. Now, of those 3 unities, we can for sure argue that unities of time and place are going to be jettisoned in this play, The Furies or the Eumenides. And so we want to put this in our notes right away. Aeschylus is very much about going his own way, doing his own thing. He breaks the rules. He's an iconoclast, as we said. A bit of history here as well. This series of plays, the Oresteia, comes at the end of an amazing life, as we said. He fought already in 2 different wars, importantly, and at the end of an amazing writing career. And there was a young writer who was coming onto the scene named Sophocles. We will turn to Sophocles in a couple of lectures from now. A young Sophocles who began to kind of even push at the bounds of what was accepted in terms of the number of actors allowed. And it will be, in fact, Aeschylus in this play that will begin to really push at the bounds of that by having any number of people on stage, actors on stage, at the same time. By the way, let's remind ourselves that we are working together in the year 458 BCE, 2 years before Aeschylus dies, and importantly, after Aeschylus dies, historians tell us that the Oresteia was in fact performed after his death, which is quite a remarkable thing, okay? Normally, you only perform plays of playwrights who are alive, and so this is, again, why Aeschylus is given such reverence, all right? There's a second thing that we want to write down because there is a, I think, timely political realization, and again, I'm not saying anything in these lectures that's brand new to me. I mean, lots and lots of scholars have pored over these plays for a long time. But it has been pointed out that this is a play that will center around a courtroom scene. It is significant that 4 years earlier, before this play was written and performed in 462, there was a really important political event. A special court, referred to as the Areopagus, because it sat on Ares, the war god's hill, and this was a really powerful court. And yet, in 462, it is limited in its powers to become only a homicide court, only trying murder, homicide, okay? And it's clear that in this play, Aeschylus is responding to that very fact as well, because the play will end up actually on the Areopagus, right there in Athens, and there will be some real debate about what's going on in regards to the new way, the new law, as it's understood in this play. Well, what Aeschylus actually will be giving us in this play, scholars have often called it an etiology. That is an origin myth of the whole notion of the idea of court justice. In other words, if somebody does something to somebody in your family, instead of just going and getting your 12 gauge and settling the issue, what is it that you do? You call 911, the police arrive, then lawyers get involved, and we go to court, and we go through that process. Now, while that sometimes seems to be a pretty bogus idea, it'd be a whole lot easier to just go get my 12 gauge and solve the problem. This Oresteia trilogy suggests, yeah, not so much. Because an eye for an eye, as Gandhi and Martin Luther King both said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And the problem, of course, with taking the law into your own hands, vigilante justice or whatever, is that sooner or later it turns into a situation like within a family where you have to figure out, is it okay to commit an act of violence against someone else? Maybe, for example, in your family, because that someone else did something to somebody in your family as well. Well, we can see where that problem leads in this play and culminates in this text, The Furies. Okay? By the way, put this in your notes as well, and we'll come back to it. This is really the first courtroom drama. So for those of you that love to watch movies or TV shows that will always kind of center around something happening in a courtroom, this is where it all begins. And of course, because we study it so often at the high school level, I will mention that really important film, and novel and film, of course, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, which of course is a novel and a film, which also centers around the idea of a courtroom scene. And for those of you that know the important Gregory Peck play, you know that the film, this is one of the first films that will use that courtroom scene. And of course, there's problems with a courtroom scene because, hello, all that usually happens is people are talking. It's just language, which means it can kind of turn into boring, okay? Aeschylus himself, aware of this, is going to try to create some tension within the courtroom, and I think he does a pretty good job of it. When we get into the play, we'll see that one, okay? Today, at least, there are two readings of this play. Let's write them down. One is a positive reading. Scholars have often said, the reason why the Oresteia is such an important play is because it shows that Greece moved from blood violence and vengeance to law. It moved from the old ways to the young ways, the new ways. It moves from insanity, which we see happening throughout this play, and insane kinds of reasoning, to finally logical, legal reasoning. And for that reason alone, this play, along with, one scholar has said, the Oresteia, along with the Parthenon, shows the greatness of Greece. One view. A second view is a little more jaded view, and it says, not so fast. There is a negative view that maybe the Oresteia, and especially this play, The Furies, is the real beginning of a stated and enforced patriarchy, where men run the world and women get right with it. Now, we said a lot about the patriarchy in other lectures. For example, when I've lectured on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and The Wife of Bath's prologue, you can go and find those lectures on learnstrong.net. We've already outlined a lot of what we mean by the patriarchy when we use that term. Here we're going to see one of the earliest instantiations, and we'll ask at the end of our lecture whether you buy it or not. Okay, so let's get to work now with the play and appreciate what I'm going to argue is true genius. I mean, I know I said that in the Harvard Classics lectures when I was dealing, for example, with Milton, but I really argue you can't have a Milton, and you can't even have a notion of Paradise Lost if you don't have some of these dramatic, powerfully dramatic presentations from the Greek epoch, starting with Aeschylus and his Oresteia. Well, let's remind you, when we're working in 303, we're always focusing on our learning theory, connecting new information to old information. That's hypercritical for us in meaningful ways, right? We do this through our reading by answering three important questions at three levels. A level 1 read, we always start there as a summary read. What is the text basically about, like what happens. A level 2 answers not the question, what does the text say, but what does the text mean? Here we begin to go below the epidermal level, below the surface level, and we begin to ask questions at 2a, themes, messages. At 2b, we begin to ask about the rhetoric. Not what Aeschylus says, but how Aeschylus says it. So, for example, we've been concentrating in the other two plays of the Oresteia on two things at level 2b. We've been looking at powerful symbols, and we've been looking at important conflicts. We'll come back to both of those as well here. Finally, at level 3, we ask, how can I relate to a text like this? Because just because somebody tells you, like I just said, okay, this is genius at play, at playwriting, and of course this is the most amazing of the trilogy plays. This is the most amazing one. I mean, if the first two have been remarkable, this final play is quite remarkable and controversial. I can say all of that, right? But the reality is that I want you to challenge yourself to begin to find some way to relate to this kind of thing. So, at level 3a, we ask, can you relate this to other texts? And We'll ask you about any number of types of texts that this play will bring up in your mind. And then finally, and most significantly, we'll ask, can you relate this to yourself at all? I mean, can you find any way? Can I resurrect at least one good question for you so that when you finish with this lecture, you walk out of here going, you know, I guess I have to think a little bit more about that. If you've done that, hopefully I've done my job, and certainly Aeschylus has done, no question, his job. So, again, just to remind, I recommend that your modus operandi in your study here is to read this play on your own and then come to my lecture as a help, okay? Now, of course, if you want, you can have your first introduction to this play through my own comments here, but I always prefer that you try and annotate on your own and then come to let me help you through this thing. All right, let's go to work at level 1. The play opens in Delphi, which will make sense because that's where Orestes was sent by the chorus at the end of Libation Bearers when he started to lose his mind because the Furies were already beginning to attack him. Go to Delphi. The oracle of Apollo is there. And of course, Apollo is the reason why Orestes showed up at Argos in the first place to kill Clytemnestra and Aeschylus. And so go there and you can begin to purify yourself and ask for some help there, okay? Well, the play will actually open then with one of Apollo's priestesses, a Pythian priestess, who will begin to speak. Fascinating. In the second line of this play, she mentions Mother Earth. And the fact that she even mentions the notion of the mother is, of course, going to resurrect all kinds of important ideas from prior plays, but it's also, put it in your notes, going to resurrect a question or two about the whole notion of the feminine as it relates specifically to what happens at the end of this play. Because whether you're a guy or a girl is going to matter at the end of this play in regards to how Orestes either gets off or gets jacked by the law, okay? So we'll be paying attention to that one. The priestess turns around. She goes into Apollo's temple. There she finds Orestes sleeping with his sword, which is an interesting, we already commented on the sword as being a powerful symbol, right? Sleeping with his sword. And she also sees these Furies, these three goddesses of vengeance, and they are portrayed as really scary. Historians, in fact, tell us that the Greek people had never seen anything like the spectacle that Aeschylus created when he created these three Furies. And it makes us think, for example, if we've seen, as a few years ago, when a performance of Macbeth was done here at our high school, that opening scene with those three really scary-looking witches, of course, Shakespeare playing the game of the Oresteia, when he opens his play Macbeth with these really scary three witches, similar kind of deal going on here. By the way, if you haven't Google imaged the Furies, just do that and take a look at some of the scary stuff that you can see. Paintings have been made of these terrible goddess witches that are going to be attacking Orestes. Why? Because he killed his ma, and that's against the rules, right? You can't kill your own kin. And to that degree, they've chased him into Apollo's temple. However, Apollo's put him to sleep. The priestess sees all this. She's freaked out. She runs away. Out of the temple will walk Apollo and Orestes, and they will begin then to have some conversation. We will see then Apollo for the first time, and he will give the following words. Lo, I desert thee never. To the end, hard at thy side is now, or sundered far, I am thy guard, and to thine enemies implacably oppose me. Look on them, these greedy fiends. He's talking about the Furies, right? These disgusting women. Beneath my craft subdued. In other words, I was able to make them all go to sleep. See, they are fallen on sleep, these beldams old. Two things here. Notice he comments on the fact that they're old women, and they are easily fooled women, right? Okay? Beldams old, unto whose grim and wizened maidenhood nor God, nor man, nor beast can e'er draw near. So let's put this in our notes right away. One of the first things Apollo says about the Furies that's wrong with them is that they are women who never have sex. They never sleep with men. Their maidenhood is protected, their virginity. And this is not perceived as a good thing, but rather as a bad thing. Now we're going to come back to this question about the patriarchal significance of this play. Already some of this is being set up. By the way, let's just go ahead and get the visuals out of the way, yes? Apollo, young, stunning god. The Furies, old, disgusting-looking goddesses. Okay? So that tension is already there beginning to be created for us, right? Yea, evil were they born, for evil's doom, evil the dark abyss of Tartarus, wherein they dwell, and they themselves the hate of men on earth and of Olympian gods. In other words, everybody hates these Furies, right? But thou, flee far, and with unfaltering speed, for they shall haunt thee through the mainland wide, where throughout the tract of travelled earth thy foot may roam, and o'er the seas, and island homes of men. Faint not nor fail too soon and timidly within thy breast, shepherding thoughts forlorn of this thy toil. But unto Pallas's city, Athens, Pallas Athena, Athens, go, and there crouch at her shrine, and in thine arms enfold her ancient image. There we well shall find meet judges for this cause, and persuasive pleas, skill to contrive for thee deliverance from all this woe. Be such my pledge to thee, for by my heist thou didst thy mother slay. Let's comment. 3 things he says. 1, you're going to get chased by these Furies until you get some deliverance. 2, the only way you're going to get deliverance, interestingly, is to go to Athens. Of course, this play is being presented at Athens, yes. The great city of justice, because Athens is named after Athena, and Athena's temple is sitting, of course, at the top of the Acropolis, right? The Parthenon, right? That famous temple. The temple of Athena, go there, go inside, grab hold of the statue of Athena. She will give you deliverance. Which is fascinating because notice, Apollo can put the Furies to sleep, but Apollo knows he cannot keep them asleep.